Okay. Hi, everyone. How are you?
Hello.
Good.
Awesome. Well, nice to see you guys. Okay. Perfect. So I'm just admitting people in. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to give about, I guess, five minutes for people to join the meeting. Perfect. Glad everybody is safe so far, I'm presuming.
Yes. Yeah.
Hi.
Be recording this this video so that way people who are not or who aren't able to make the video or the live video, they'll also be able to see it. So if you know anybody that was interested in it, we're going to be sending that out as well, and I'm going to send it to Bob, so that way you can see it for later on. Cool. Okay, so we have a couple more people trickling in. Perfect.
It's just like a regular PIM night.
That's right.
I know.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Renee.
Hey, Renee.
Hello. How are you, Miss Evan? Hi, Starla.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Gloria.
Hey,
Hi, Renee.
how are you?
Hi, Kevin.
Hello.
Hey.
So I guess while we're waiting another 3 minutes, does anybody have any questions about anything or anything that they're more interested to find out, I guess, about my running and things like that? That way I can make sure to weave it in accordingly. Not so much yet. Okay.
I think I'm interested in your experience at the marathon trial.
Cool. Yeah, definitely have some fun stories there that I can definitely share, which I don't think I've really shared or talked very much about. So yeah, definitely a fun experience.
Oh, there's everybody.
Okay.
I love technology. The one thing I've learned during this thing is that there's so many different ways, I guess, to communicate and to keep things going.
Yeah, there definitely has. I agree. I feel like everybody has honed in on their technological skills. I mean, even Bob was showing me how to use YouTube Live yesterday, or like trying to show me how it worked. So definitely, I'm improving myself.
Yeah.
Teaching old dogs new tricks.
That's
or at least young ones, yes. Okay, so I'm going to get started. As people join the waiting room, I'll go ahead and add them in. But for those that don't know me, my name is Starla Garcia. I was one of the most recent, I guess, Olympic trials qualifiers for Houston. My Olympic qualifying time came at Houston, and so I'll also share a little bit more about that. But where I usually like to start is the very early beginnings of my running journey. So that way people also become familiar with, like, everybody starts somewhere, and I always like to share that, especially for newer runners or people who are seeking some motivation into where their running journeys are. I'm just gonna mute it really quickly. So I'm gonna mute everybody. Okay. So I feel like it's really important for me to share that, especially when people are comparing where my level is to theirs, because I did start at the very beginning of like being a kid and not being very good. But I always really enjoyed running as a kid. My parents really nurtured that part of my identity as a child. I'm a middle child, and I have two sisters, an older sister and a younger sister. My older sister is very academically inclined, and my younger sister was always very like loving and also nurturing as well. So I always had a really interesting way of figuring out where did I stand or what were my best attributes as a kid. And so one day I went and I did field day at school, and I was number 2, and I was a type A perfectionist child, and I did not like losing. I had a really hard time learning how to fail as a kid, and I remember telling my parents that I wanted to win. So that was like my very, very first race. It was probably like 50-meter dash. It wasn't very long, but I really, really wanted to be the best runner. And then when I was in elementary school, I figured out, well, I am pretty good at this thing. And then I ended up finally winning a race. And I feel like from there, it was just really, really more appealing to me. And I quickly became identified as the runner. And as like a child that young, that is something that I think was really, I took really to heart as part of my identity. And so as a middle school kid, I continued to run. And then in high school, I continued to run as well. I played a lot of other sports too. My parents were really encouraging and trying all kinds of things. And I think that's where I really figured out that I really, really liked running. And I really felt like I was really good at it too. So I went to my coach in high school and I asked him, you know, what would it take to run in college? I really want to run in college and I see myself doing this thing. And he said, well, if you want to run, you're going to have to work really, really hard. And I said, okay. And I just kind of put my head down. Again, I was not the best runner as a kid. There were always girls that were always better than me. I was never the fastest, but I just kept going to practice. I kept doing what my coaches told me. And again, it also just kind of goes back to my type A go-getter personality. And so I didn't make any excuses. I just woke up whenever my coach told me to be at practice, and then I was there every day. I don't think I ever really missed a practice in high school unless I was sick. I was always there in the summers, and I just put in my time, and I showed face. And so I think that's what has really helped me even now as an adult runner, just really sticking to the plan and not second guessing and just kind of doing what running does take to be successful long term. So when I was a junior in college, in high school, sorry, when I was a junior in high school, you're getting ready for all the recruiting to happen. You're getting ready for your senior year. And I actually had a lot of AP courses going on as well. So I was trying really, really hard to leave the area that I was from. I'm originally from a small town called Far, Texas. It's I wouldn't say a small area, but it's from the Rio Grande Valley. And for those who are not familiar, if you Googled McAllen, Texas, I'm from a little town right next door. I literally live a street away from McAllen, Texas. So I'm from a little town, and I wanted to leave that area so badly because I wanted to experience the world. And I knew the only way to leave that area was to either leave on academic scholarship or to leave an athletic one or a combined one. I knew I wasn't like an all-American runner, so I relied really heavily on my academic scholarships that I was trying to get. So there was a lot of pressure to do really well, but again, I felt like because I was finally an upperclassman, I had to perform and I had to try even harder. So I put a lot of pressure on myself that year. Where my story kind of gets a little bit more, I guess, interesting is I started to develop disordered eating habits because I wanted to lose weight and I felt like my running would improve if I lost weight. Okay, so I think there's a lot of very innocent, like, I wouldn't say thoughts, but I think we're all kind of in the same boat where we think sometimes if we lose a little bit more weight, we actually will become better runners. And so I did feed into that theory and that thought as well. And I actually did get faster. And so my coaches and my teammates did feed the idea of, well, you are looking more fit, you are running faster, this is probably why. But it was never really put back onto, well, you've done the work, and so this is why you are faster. And so I went into college. I was actually being recruited my senior year. I was recruited by several different colleges, and I had a really hard time deciding where I wanted to go to college, because I was really concerned about, well, is it going to have the athletic part that I really like, and am I going to be the best one? Because I actually wanted to be in a program where there were going to be upperclassmen that were going to be better than me. I wanted to be pushed. I wanted to run my fastest. I didn't want to go into a team being the young person and being the fastest. Despite me being an overachieving person, I wanted to be in a pool of people that were going to push me to be better. I didn't want to always be the best person. So it's kind of like that saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you probably want to find a new group of people. So I kind of applied the same scenario into my running. I didn't want to be the fastest person in the room. I wanted to be around other fast people. So that was a really hard thing for me. And I think when I was going through the recruiting process, a lot of people don't really know how to help you navigate it, because a lot of people have never actually gone through it either. And so when I was being recruited, I was being, I guess like, encouraged to go to some other schools or smaller schools. And there's nothing wrong with that if you know anybody that's going to a smaller school. But I knew for me academically, I wanted to go to a really great school. I didn't want to go to a school that was going to give me the best outcome, even past my collegiate years there. I wanted to make sure that job-wise and security-wise that I was going to have those things as well. So I was thinking also very long-term past college. So University of Houston reached out, and the coach came and visited me in high school, and he asked me to go over into the school and check it out, see the program, things like that. To be honest, Houston was the last place I thought of coming. It was not on my radar. I had not applied at all to come to the University of Houston. And when I first came, I just remember thinking, like, there's just a bunch of highways and concrete. Where am I going to run? There are no trails. Like, what am I going to do? And when I came to the campus and I met the team and I saw the facility, I saw not just like a really great opportunity, but a great opportunity to build something and to be part of a team that was still navigating its own growth at the same time. And I felt like that's what I needed. I wasn't like, maybe a Baylor or Texas A&M or an OSU team or anything like that, but it was a school that did have a reputation for track and field, and it was still in its infancy in the distance program. So I felt like that was the best decision for me. And then it was in the best medical center, in my opinion, in the world. And at that time, I wanted to be a doctor. So I was like, I want to go to the best place that's going to give me the best opportunity to do those things as well. So when I started my collegiate year and freshman year, I had a really, I was very, very lucky. I had almost instant success. I ended up making, I think I was like 4th or 5th on the indoor all time as a freshman. So I was 19 years old, running really well. I think my PRs at that time for like a 5,000 meter, and this was like the springtime. So that was like 17:37. And at that time, if people don't know, Tom Tellez, he's one of like the best coaches in track and field of his time. He was always around in the U of H facility, and he would see me and we would always chat. And he always told me that I had the talent of somebody who could be an All-American runner. And so for a kid that came from a very small place, to have a coach of that caliber talk to you and tell you those things, it makes you feel really special. It makes you feel like you have to work even harder, and that you can't waste this opportunity. And I don't think it put a lot of pressure on me to actually do those things. I think it just opened up my eyes to what was actually possible. And so I ended up closing the season on a really good note. And then I ended up going to USA Junior Track and Field Championships. So it was for runners that were 19 years and under, and you had to run under an 18 18-minute 5,000 meter. So I was, I think, one of maybe 10 or 15 people that ended up racing that day. So it was up in Eugene, Oregon. It was probably one of the biggest meets that I had ever been to at that time. And so you're around a bunch of future collegiate runners on the track and probably some of the best high school track and field athletes as well. So that was, I think, probably my first taste of actual real success. But when I was on the track, there was still a lot of lack of self-esteem and lack of self-confidence. So the entire time that I was lined up, I was very happy, excited, looking forward to the experience, racing, and I was not in shape to run of my best time, but I was really lucky and I was really happy to be there. But the entire time I just compared how my body looked on the starting line, and I never really took in the entire experience fully or appreciated, where I came from. And I always let what everybody else looked like to tell me how I was actually going to do. So despite being, I would say I wouldn't say pretty fit, but despite being a 19-year-old runner and running really well and running really fast, I never really felt confident in my own body, even though I was starting at the starting line of a championship race. So when I returned home, the eating disorder habits that I had when I was younger ended up coming back. And then I ended up starting my sophomore year. Very, very low body weight and not performing really well. I was having very hard time recovering. I was not a nice person. And I would say that after that, I could not actually mentally or emotionally take the entire collegiate experience at its fullest anymore in terms of training or even, I think just even creating relationships with my teammates were no longer the same or long-lasting relationships anymore. And it was because of my eating disorder. So I suffered with an eating disorder at U of H for a couple of years, for the remainder of my collegiate career, I would say, until maybe 2012. So I went to therapy at the very beginning of my sophomore year of cross country. And how that happened was we were at a track session, and my teammate actually, she knew what was happening, and she reached out to the coach after our track session, and she was very concerned about me. And so later that day, my coach pulled me into his office and he asked me if anything was wrong. And so I kind of denied it. I pushed it away. And he's like, no, I know what's going on, and we need to get you into treatment. We need to get you into therapy before anything else happens. And you need to call your parents and you need to tell them what's happening, because if you don't, we're going to kick you off the team. And so for somebody that's a very type A personality, that's a very big people pleaser, that's the worst thing that could happen. And I could not let my family down. I had left home really young. I was representing an entire community of people. I was representing my family, and I had big things that I was supposed to accomplish. So I willingly and thankfully went into treatment within the next week. So I was in treatment for a couple of more years after that. I was still on my eligibility. I was still running. I think most of the time my coaches were really concerned that if I stopped running, that they would have to let me go of my scholarship, and then I would have to go home. And then what would happen to Starla? So I was really lucky that the University of Houston was very progressive in providing services to student athletes at that time. And they were actually one of the first programs to be offering those things. So I was just there at the right time, right everything, right place, right program, right coaches, and they took care of me. So I entered recovery in 2012, and then I started my 5th year in a very, very healthy body. It was a complete 180. And I remember one of the first times I knew I was actually in recovery was when one of my teammates, and I had known him since high school, and we were recruited at the same trip. He had told me, we were laughing and laughing one day after practice, and he was like, I have not heard you laugh in the longest time. You need to laugh more. And so that was probably, again, one of the very first memories that I remember of him, really, really happy that I had moved into a new space, because he had seen me very healthy as a high school runner, and then seen me at my lowest point in college, and to now see me on the other side again. So I'm really, really thankful for that time. It taught me a lot of perseverance, resilience, and just sticking with something, even though it's really challenging and hard, because you never know what's going to happen at the end of it. And so my 5th year, I wouldn't say it was very good, but I just hung in there. I was still learning my new body, still learning how to run, and I finished that track season off, and then grad school, and then other things with undergrad and then graduate school, and then getting my dietetic internship. So now I work as a dietitian. But with running after college, that was another whole experience and even identity that I had to really work through, of no longer being a student athlete and really figuring out, where did running take a role in my life now? There was no more races every single week to tell me how I was doing. There was no more constant feedback. And so when my 5th year, I remember Steve Magnus, he was my coach at U of H my last year. He asked me, why do you like to run? What is it that makes you go every day? Why do you wake up? Why are you still here? And it wasn't like, why are you still here? Why don't you leave? It was more of like, why are you still here doing this thing? We need to figure that out. And so I remember answering, well, it's the connection, it's being outside, it's being connected to my body, it's being connected to what makes me happy, what makes me feel connected to my highest self. This is what I envision my highest self doing every single day. If I were 30 years older, my highest self is still the person running. And so even now in my running, I still think about Starla in her highest self. What is she doing? Is running still there, or is it not there anymore? And so once it's no longer there, I'll see what happens. But for now, it still continues to be there. So a lot of the times I'm still really focusing on, what does Starla need every single day and every single week? So after college, I really, really focused on that. I did not run with a watch most days. I didn't train and do hard workouts anymore. And when I finished collegiate training, I really actually signed up for the Houston Marathon for 2014. So that was my first marathon. And training into that first marathon, I didn't run more than 2 hours. I didn't do hard workouts. I would stop if I needed to. I would say my longest run was about 1 hour and 45 minutes, but there was always daily runs. And I would say maybe my max amount of mileage was about 55 miles a week. So it was very, very kind of pieced together. I did not know what I was doing. I didn't run with a group because I didn't want to be putting that pressure on myself to define what my marathon time should be. I did not know paces anymore. I didn't even know what the Boston qualifying time was or what that pace would look like. So when I signed up and then I lined up for my first marathon, I was running it with a friend, and she asked me if I was going to try and qualify for the Boston Marathon. And I was like, oh, well, sure, I guess. And then I asked what the pace was, and she told me the pace. And then there was a woman standing next to us hearing our whole conversation. And she asked me if this was my first marathon, and I responded, yes, it is. And she said, don't worry about it. Just enjoy it. Just go out and enjoy it. And it's funny because I don't remember a lot of conversations throughout the race or throughout many races anymore, but what that woman told me is always something that I remember every single time I line up. So when I did that first marathon, I just remember thinking, this is so great. This is so fun. And I remember getting to the last 10K and just having so much fun and really taking in the entire experience, because up until that point, I had never ran through the Galleria. I had never ran through West U. All I knew was around U of H and Memorial Park, and that was about it, and a little bit of around Rice. But everything else was completely new. So it was a whole new experience and a whole new course, a whole new side of Houston that I had never seen or experienced before. So when I finished, I think it was 3:19 something. So I had Boston qualified. I was super excited. And then I remember my friend, she finished about 5 minutes behind me, and we had a whole blast doing it together. And then I remember just thinking, like, I can't wait for the next one. And after that, I actually was injured for a couple more years. So it wasn't like immediate success or anything like that. It was very, I guess it is a privilege because I did have all of my collegiate training to support that marathon. But I will say that after that, I was so injured that I couldn't run for a couple months. I had a hip injury, and so that took time to heal on its own, to strengthen. And my next race was not until um, Houston Marathon 2017. So I didn't run anything. I didn't do any half marathons. I didn't run any 10Ks or 5Ks. I just kind of allowed my body to reheal itself. And then I went through other life things with school and then my job. And so my next marathon was 2017. And that was a very hot year. If any of you guys remember, it was very, very hot. A lot of people had to pull out, or I remember they were sending out emails every single day about hydrating and making sure that you had hydration on you. So I was going up that day. I was supposed to start with my friend, but we ended up separating around mile 2. And again, I just kind of approached it the same way, same training method, very, very loose runs, would stop. But the day of the race, I was determined to finish. And I don't know what happens over me whenever I am running, but I always think of it as, let me do what I can in this moment. What is my best asking of me right now? And so whenever I'm faced with a challenge on a race, I always think of how can I make this less stressful? And so that day I remember carrying some tablets on me for salt, and then on the course there were several sponges or towels with ice water, so I would grab them and then I would stick it in the back of my sports bra, and then until it was over or it was done with, I would throw it out again. So that's really how I just stayed cool throughout the race and then just kept going. It was not very any much faster than my 2014 race. I think it was 3:18 something, so I think just a minute faster, but I think it was enough to fuel me to say, I had 2.5 years, 3 years in between my races. There's still something here. This doesn't happen to many people that take this much of a break from marathoning or running in general. I need to explore this some more. So I decided to sign up for Boston 2018. And the lead up to that was really short. I was injured again. I had some tendonitis problems in 2017 of that fall. So I didn't run Houston the next year. I ended up actually, what I ended up doing was starting to train again in January. So I had about 3 months to train. I was still doing baby jogs here and there, but I really started training in January of 2018 with the Houston Harriers. So I had heard that they were at the track, and a lot of them were going to Boston. So I decided, hey, why not? I need a group. I don't want to die in the hills in Boston, so let me sign up. And I actually started doing workouts again with them. So it had been about 5 years since I had stepped on a track. So slowly and slowly went to their practices, got adjusted to the training. I only did track workouts once a week. I actually still do them just once a week, but it was a good introduction into what it was like to train as an adult without being a student, and then still having to balance all of these different things in my life. So like career, getting off of work, running before work and after work and things like that. So it was a whole new experience for me too, as an adult runner leading up to a larger race and what it would take to run well. I had so much fun sharing my experiences for Boston. And I think even just the lead up was a lot of fun for me. And I think it just ignited, again, a piece that I had been missing for a long time and created more of a community. And I think that's really what I had missed in my previous two. I think it probably would have been more enjoyable and more celebratory had I had more of a community around me. Because those two races, while they were great, and I had a lot of fun and they were very necessary for me at that time, I think if I had actually had more people to be around and experience just the joyfulness of running, it probably would have made the marathon a lot more joyous for me. But it didn't come until Boston 2018, which is a very cold, freezing year. And that was an experience in its own. I would say nutrition wise, I had Probably taken the most gels I've ever taken, even now in a marathon. And I just remember thinking the entire time that I just had to finish, or else what else was I gonna say? I didn't want to stop. And that was just me. There was just the fear of, if I stop today, what would that say about me, or what would that actually, what would that show me? And so for me, whenever I'm racing something really difficult, I'm trying to reframe it in a way of, this is a really difficult thing, but what is this going to show me about myself when I finish this race? What am I expecting to learn? And so we don't really know the answer to that when we are racing, but it always comes after the hard race, or a few months after, or in the next training cycle, it'll show itself. So I always keep that in mind and try to stay optimistic if it's a challenging day or a challenging race. Sometimes they're not always going to be perfect. And that was a really good example of, training really hard for something, but it just was something out of my control. The only thing that I could control was myself, my mind, and what I was taking in. And so going into the race that morning, I remember thinking, this is going to be an experience, a roller coaster, and everything else that's a little bit frightening. But I can only be grateful for being at the starting line healthy, and I can only be grateful for my community at this point. So I remember writing in my journal that those were the things that I was grateful for, and then starting the race. And then I actually had a PR that day. It was 3:15. So again, I think I was refueled by the idea of what else is possible if I just try a little bit more, or if I just put in the time, or if I explore the possibility of just trying. So after Boston 2018, I will say I went through it's like none of those post-marathon blues that everybody gets. I experienced that. I think because it was such an adrenaline rush that day, there was so much coming at me at one time. I experienced a lot of post-marathon blues for about a couple months. And I think I was just really trying to figure out what will be my next race, or what will that be like, or what is the next challenge, because I felt like I had been so challenged that day, and I wondered, would another race actually be as equal to this experience? Even though there were no spectators out that day, I think it was just that it was just so challenging. It's a really scary experience when you're in it, I would say, or not frightening, but it leaves you wondering, what else is there? How high is my resilience factor? And so I think that was enticing, but it also left me wondering, would anything actually top this or fulfill it again? So when I started training for CIM 2018, I took a different approach. I actually was working with Cal Neff a little bit more closely, and he was helping me with a plan. I wanted to get faster, and I set my goal on running a sub 3-hour marathon. So I'd have to shave off 15 minutes, which was, I knew was going to be a lot for a marathon, but possible. And I think at that time too, Houston hadn't had a lot of women breaking 3-hour. So I think that was a little bit scary in itself, but I felt like that was a challenge that I just had to take on. And so it was never actually the Olympic trials marathon at all. I was still trying to, get my time down, and that's what I was focusing on. So it wasn't like I wanted to be an Olympic trials qualifier. It was like, I just want to break 3 hours and let's just see what happens. So I trained really well, had a really great day, had a breakout day at CIM, and ran a 2:53. Shaved off like almost 25 minutes. So yeah, about 25 minutes or so. So I had a great day. And that's when I think it finally came into my mind, okay, if you could do this, if you could break off that much time, what else is there? What else is it going to take? And so a lot of people encouraged me to go for the trials time. So I would say that it didn't come from me necessarily, but it really came with the support of my running community. And then I also heard a podcast on a girl that just believed in herself so much. And I had never even met this girl, but I just felt so connected to her journey. And I was so, I guess I admired her courage to try. And I felt like if this girl could believe in herself that much and have the courage to try something really, really hard, why can't I? If I've gone through all these other difficult things in my life and all these other struggles, why can't I believe in myself that much too? And so I remember waiting after the Houston half, because I did the Houston half shortly after that in January, to really start focusing on qualifying for the trials. And I felt like it was in my reach, but I knew that it was going to have to really come down to improving my half marathon time, putting in a little bit more work on the track, faster things, and then just staying healthy, because I had about a year to get the time. So I would say after that, my next race was Grandma's 2019. I worked really, really hard. I remember I felt like I had never worked so hard in my life. I remember leaving track workouts completely exhausted, to where I would get home and I would fall asleep, still wrapped in my towel, because I would just be so exhausted. Sometimes I couldn't eat very much, or my stomach would still feel really queasy from the evening track workouts. But, just putting in the time and, making sure that everything was aligned accordingly for another breakout day. So I went to Grandma's, ran a 2:47, missed it by 2 minutes, and then reassessed again. And I would say, a lot of people would have been really excited. And now looking in hindsight, I wanted to be excited so badly, but I just could not. And I tried to be really grateful for the experience, but it was the fact that I did not complete a goal, that I had failed the goal. It could not leave my mind. And so I signed up for another race. I will say about that race, now looking back at it, it showed me that even if you work really hard, sometimes things don't happen necessarily the way that you want it to be, but it really showed me that I just had to stick with it. If you want something really badly, there's always another time to try. You always have another opportunity if you want it. And so I just remember thinking, I just have to stay with the hard stuff. The hard stuff just is going to always make me better. And so even if that day didn't happen, the fact that I have another opportunity, a couple more months to make the time, that's what I need to be grateful for. So I did it again at CIM. I got to mile 17 and a half, and then stepped off the course. So my feet were hurting really badly. My toes had gotten bruised up. I had thought that I had lost a toenail. And at 17 miles and a half, I took a step and it felt like I had a needle that went through right through my toe. So I remember trying to walk another step with my teammate who was running with me. And I just yelled at her like, nope, I'll get it another day. And I remember the elite van coming up right next to me, and he said, like, are you done? And I was like, yep, I'm done. So I hopped in the van, and actually he had to carry me to the van. I couldn't even walk anymore. My feet were hurting that badly to where I couldn't take any more steps. So he picked me up, put me in the van. We watched the whole rest of the race. So the van was parallel to the entire race the entire time. And so I watched everybody else finish, but it made me so proud to see other people doing great things. And it was really hard for me to feel bad, to be honest, watching people. I think it just gave me a lot of, it felt like it gave me a lot more hope to what could happen. So I ended up being carried out of the van, and then when I got to Houston, I checked on my toes every day until Houston Chevron Marathon. And the day of the race, I just remember thinking, I've literally done everything possible. There's nothing else I could do at this point. All the long runs, all the hard workouts, all of the miles that I put in, all the 6 months from Grandma's marathon in June to January 2020. there's literally nothing else anymore that I could say that, you know, there were any holes in my training or anything like that. So I had to really trust now in all of the work that had been put in and stop overthinking all of the times that it didn't happen. So the day of the race, I remember I had known maybe about 2 or 3 other girls trying to go for the time. And the entire time, we just encouraged each other. Whenever there was a water stand where it looked like it was too packed, I would grab 2 cups and hand it over to my friend. And then we would do that back and forth if we felt like the other person needed water or fluid. I'm lucky to where I can literally take in any kind of fluid. I don't have GI problems and any kind of gel. So I'm really lucky in that part. But we shared a lot of, you know, just kind of taking care of each other on the course. So I would say the most exciting part for me in any race is the last 10K. It sounds really crazy, but whenever I think of the last 10K, I always think of my very first marathon and what that felt like. I always take the excitement of that very first time I did it. So I always apply it to every single race that I do now. I try to channel in on all that excitement that I felt that very first time. Because you can never ever relive that first time, only when you do another marathon. So whenever I do hard marathons, I always think of that very first time, because your mind just has to go somewhere else other than the pain and the suffering and the things that hurt. You always want to channel it into something joyful and something meaningful, or at least that's how I approach my last 10K all the time. So I channeled it into really joyous things, or a lot of things that I'm always most proud of in my life. Those are the things that I refer back to versus what's actually happening physically. So that works for me. And I would say, you know, during the last 10K or last few miles of that race, I had another girl with me, and we just, you know, talked to each other the entire time. I knew the course, so I was calling out the tangents and just really hoping that this person was going to be there to celebrate with me at the end. I didn't want to cross the finish line alone and nobody was around. And I think that really helped me focus on her and what was happening ahead of us, or what could happen ahead of us. So I ended up finishing, I think in my chip time was 2:43:56, and I think the actual like clock time was 2:44:04 or something like that. So I qualified for the trials off of that race, but it had to come at the right time, with the right environment, with the right people around me, and all the support that I had. So I wouldn't change it for any other way, and it just had to happen that way. So I'm really lucky in that, you know, it happened at Houston eventually for me. Leading up to the trials, I had really great workouts. I will say I took about a week completely off to just allow my body to rest. And then it was back into hard stuff, maybe like 3 weeks prior to the trial. So I had about 2.5, 3 weeks of really good training. And then the other few weeks were really just kind of getting my legs under me again and getting used to running after a marathon. So I always encourage those things whenever I have people ask me, how do we bounce back? Take it really slowly. Everybody's body's different. But for my training, since I was going to race the trials, it had to come right back in pretty quickly. So I would say the most fun experience of the trials was, I think, all the excitement in the hotel and around bib pickup, around bottle pickup, around, you know, at breakfast time. So you saw everybody having breakfast together, lunch together, things like that. I think it was just such a tight community because on social media, you follow people on social media and you really learn about their journey to the trials and, you know, what they had to do and how much they gave up or how much they sacrificed, how many times it took them to make the trials. So I would say that that was probably the most fun thing, was just this community that I had already been created prior to the trials. There were people that I had never met in real life, and I finally met them in real life. And we were messaging each other for months on end before I even qualified. So I think that was probably the most fun and most enjoyable part for me. And then of course you do see professionals just hanging out in the hallway. I wouldn't say that I actually did go up to them and ask for a photo or anything like that. And I feel like a lot of people were really respectful of the professionals because they were trying to grab a spot on the Olympic team. So I think a lot of people did see them and they probably wanted to go and say hi and hug them just like I did. But for just respect, we gave them their space and their mental energy for race day and maybe leave it for after. So that's kind of what I saw on my end. I'd say the day of the race, it was just really, really exciting and a really happy feeling. I don't remember feeling like very nervous or scared. I didn't know how I was going to do. I think part of me knew that it was going to be okay. I knew the course was going to be very tough and I knew that the wind was going to be strong. But again, I could only control what I could control. And that was how I was feeling, what mental space I was in, what the purpose of the race was going to be for me, and then again, my nutrition. So controlling those things and not allowing the course to get inside my head or what the wind was going to be like. It was really, you know, what could Starla control and what is the purpose of today? So when we started the race, I remember thinking, I can't believe there's so many people here. Like that was probably my first thought. And I just remember feeling so proud too, of not just myself, but all the other women that were next to me. I hadn't ever started a race where it was 100% women around me. And I think that was just such a statement in women's running and the women's running culture at this time. And I knew that that day was going to be special for that reason. And I think that's why I really wanted to be there, because for me, lining up just wasn't like a symbol of me overcoming my entire journey up to that point, but it was a statement of, you know, here I am, this unconventional runner, making it this far. I was not ever supposed to make it that far, in my opinion. I had gone through an eating disorder. I came from a small community. I struggled a lot in grad school. You know, I had gotten injured many times before actually trying to run again and trying to improve my time. You know, and I think for me, my driving factor has always been where my community is in the Rio Grande Valley. Coming from a predominantly Latino area, it was more of like, I had to do it because I needed other girls like me from where I came from to see that. And it was so important for me to do that, to know that it's possible. And I think also just culturally, it's not very normal for a woman my age, in my culture, being a Hispanic woman, to be doing things like this, to have dreams, to have wants, and to actually accomplish them on your own. Even though I do have a great community here, a lot of the times you are navigating these new experiences that, you know, nobody in your family has ever actually done. And that was like going to college at a very young age, you know, being an athlete at a very young age. I had never had anybody to do that. And so it always felt like such a privilege and a responsibility to my community to do those things. So when I lined up, I felt like I had finally fulfilled my responsibility to my community. So I always try to think about those kinds of things whenever I'm actually doing something meaningful or something big. I never ever want to just do it for myself. It's always something much bigger and on a grander scale. So when the race started, I remember my boyfriend saying that he knew the race had started because there was such a loud cheer. He's like, I had never heard a race that loud. It was almost deafening, and you knew when the women were coming around each time because it just like was the loudest thing. And I think being in the race, it was really interesting because I remember looking over and everybody was smiling. Like I think we had gone through the first mile like 5:45 or like 5:50, and I remember looking towards the girl next to me, and she had the hugest smile on her face. And then I could hear somebody else crying next to me, but they were just smiling. And so I could just tell that it was just such an emotional day for everybody. And I think that was probably, I think the most special part was whenever you are running, you don't realize how vulnerable you make yourself. You're allowing somebody to see the best parts of you and the parts that are struggling at the same time. And so whenever I saw those women, it was like, I'm just seeing the best, highest version of themselves today. I don't really know what their struggle is, but whatever it is, it doesn't really matter anymore. What matters is like they're actually living in the moment and they're living into themselves at this moment. So whenever I'm racing and I see other people or even like just spectating, it brings so much joy. And I think you guys probably feel the same way because you actually see that person at face value and you're acknowledging them also, and you acknowledge their hard work and you acknowledge how much they're putting themselves into this experience. And I don't think, for me, whenever I see runners of all stages and all levels, it just makes me respect them a lot more because they're just wanting to be better. Just like the woman at the starting line, she was just wanting to be better. And then because she wanted to be better, she was provided this experience. And so it was just like me. I just wanted to be better. I just wanted to see what was there. And then I was just given that experience. So I would say that that was probably the biggest takeaway for me. It was a very challenging course. I just kind of hung in there, didn't have a plan necessarily. My plan was just to really celebrate and have fun and run a good race. I didn't want to, just give up at the end. I knew it was going to be difficult. So I just told myself, it's okay, just work through it and stay in it and then get to the finish. And so I would say the last 5K was the hardest 5K of my life. I've never run such a challenging course. It was a complete uphill, at least for a mile and a half, it felt like, until we finally got really close to the finish and then it leveled out. But it was a climb most of the way back up to the finish. And then I would say afterwards, I would say that it was just so much celebration after the finish. Everybody hugging each other, being so thrilled for the opportunity to be there. And then, just being part of, the Olympic celebration at that point. Right now, my running is a lot more free form because I don't have any races, and I'm sure you guys can really understand that too. But right now, a lot of my running is just, day to day, week by week. I slowly built myself back up to longer runs again, but for right now, no hard workouts. I'm doing some virtual fun races, and then so just kind of taking it day by day, allowing my body to reset. I did a lot of marathons in the last year and a half, so really giving my body the break that it needs, so that way it doesn't break down in the fall or even next spring. So my next race, who knows at this point, but right now my next race, I'll actually be pacing the Chevron Marathon. So I don't know if I'll be in the 3 hour or 3.5 hour, but right now those are my plans. And I think it'll be fun for me to do something outside of my goals and actually helping other people achieve their own running goals now and being there for them and celebrating them at that time. Do you guys have any questions about anything about running or anything about my journey that you guys would like to know more about? I'm going to unmute you guys. Okay. Do you guys have any questions? And also, thanks for staying with me. I know I got choked up for about 10 minutes.
Congratulations.
That would have been a bad time to leave. So that was wonderful. Thank you, Starla.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Regarding your injuries, how do you stay? And I mean, is there certain core workouts that you do? Like you just run? I mean, I'm sure you do some core workouts to maintain.
Um, you know, I wish I was a better runner in that sense. I do them about like once, but not too much to be honest. I try to focus on like, I don't want to say fundamental, but most of the time with my running, I just really focus on like, how do I feel that day? I think for me, because I did go through an eating disorder, I try to not change too much of like my routine, or like I try not to get in the mindset of like I need to have abs to be a better runner. So whenever I'm approaching like core work, it's more of like I need this to actually stay strong at the end of the race and things like that. So I think for me at this time during quarantine, um, I try to really keep a healthy mindset and approach around it, because it is a really stressful time. And so one of my triggers when I was going through treatment was stress or self-induced stress, perfectionism stress. So I really try to like be really open-minded about how I'm approaching some strength or core work, because I think there's still some kind of fear of like relapsing, at least for me, to be quite honest, to where maybe I would get too caught up in, how do my abs look if I'm doing crunches or core work. So, yeah, I try to keep it just like once a week, I'm going to do this just so I stay strong for my running and not put so much aesthetics on the line.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
How many miles or how many miles, I guess, or do you run now? A day, or is it like you said? I know you're just doing free form, but what what is your, I guess, your day in running? How many do you do?
So right now, I'd say like, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, I hit 60 miles a week. And then today, so today I did like 10. Um, but so far this week, it's been like anywhere from 5 to 10 max. And then I think my long runs are capped at 15. So I think for me personally, I don't feel like I need to do anything more than 15 right now, because I'm not training for anything. I feel like it's more like fitness based, or like just
Mhm.
trying to maintain some of my fitness. But for me, I'd say like maintaining my level of fitness would be anywhere between like 8 to 10 daily
A
basis.
day?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I take a day
Good.
off too, so it
Do
varies.
you?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Good.
Have you got any strategies to help avoid injury aside from your running? Like any
Mhm.
tips or tricks that have helped with that?
Yeah, the hypervolt is amazing.
Oh yeah.
um, I would say that if you are ever going to spend money on a tool, that's a great one. Yeah, it looks a little bit ridiculous, or like maybe even like thinking about the cost of it, but I have found it so helpful, just like working into those little nooks or crannies. Or I had plantar fasciitis too. I would say even before my build up to grandma. So right after Houston half marathon 2019, I started getting plantar fasciitis, and the hypervolt actually helped a lot in managing my plantar fasciitis. It would get really flared up after track workouts. It's actually really painful to put the hypervolt on your plantar, but it really helps a lot with loosening it up. And then even like, because my boyfriend's also a runner, so he uses the hypervolt quite a bit whenever he does feel tight in hip areas or in his hamstrings. So I would say that's probably my number one recommended tool. Foam rolling. I also make sure to sleep. So even like days where I think in training, my two training partners who also went to the trials were in bed by like 8:30, 9 p.m. most nights. And so I know like that can be really hard for most adults. And again, like I don't have kids or anything like that, but we were in bed by like 2:30, and it was so funny because I remember we traveled on a trip all together one time for fun, and we could not stay up past 9:30. We were dying. So we all like to go to bed between 8:30 and 9. We would all wake up on our own by 7. So they were like the best travel buddies because we all schedule. Yeah. So I would say sleep was a big one for us. Yeah. Yeah.
Fun.
And I would say also injury wise, I would say like even like nutrition wise, and that's coming from a dietitian too, but I will say like my training partners, they eat very well. And I give them input to what they're doing, but most of the time like they eat very, very well, and they recover really well too because they eat well. So even like taking in enough calories to where they're not breaking down, because they were doing longer workouts sometimes than I was, just because they could, or their capacity for it was a lot bigger than mine. And they were also putting up to like 90 to 100-mile weeks. So their nutrition had to be spot on. And I feel like they did a really good job of making sure that they slept, they ate well, and they hydrated really well too. Because when we are hydrated, you are more likely to pull something or have muscular or tissue breakdown. Yeah. So even in the hot months, it's really important. Even if you're going for a regular run, you want to make sure you're hydrated. And I would say, so I would have one of these at the track and I would finish it. And then I would have a second one even when I would get home. And so this is already 50 mLs, 50 fluid ounces. So I would have 100 just around track sessions. And that doesn't even count what I drink throughout the day.
Wow.
So, yeah.
A lot.
So hydration's a big one. Yeah. Any other questions on that? I think that's a good question. I kind of forget about injuries, but that's a big one.
Yeah.
I would say also, I went to a PT for my plantar fasciitis. So for even things like that, I found it really helpful for me just to even get like an opinion on stuff like that, because if you wait too long, it could tear or something like that. So I would go there, and then I also would see a chiropractor at least once a month to just get realigned. I think that's really overlooked by runners too, and it could also just be like maybe you're a little bit scared of somebody doing realignments for you, but I would go see my care provider regularly, just because you are running and you're also bouncing and your head is also bouncing a lot. And then based off of your form, or even like before I would get on a plane, I would go and see him. And then whenever I would get back, I would go and see him again. So really, really taking care of my spine is a big one for me, because also my hip injury. So I never want to be out of alignment either, because my hips are, I know that they could get injured too.
Mhm. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Nope.
I think we're good.
Awesome. Okay. And then if you guys ever have any questions about anything, you guys are welcome to contact me via Facebook. I'm pretty responsive on there, or even find me on social media on Instagram. My Instagram is Starla_shines, and I respond to basically almost everybody that sends me a question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you,
Thank you.
Stella.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Congratulations.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All
See you
right.
guys.
See you guys out there
See
when
you
it's
out there.
Take
our
care.
again.
Okay.
Be
Bye.
safe.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes.
Bye.